It starts quietly, the way most realizations do, not with a moment that announces itself, but with a feeling that lingers after everything else has gone silent. The room is dim, the day has folded itself away, and there is a sense that something important was missed, not because it was hidden, but because it was ignored. You might know this feeling. The sense that you were loyal, patient, present, and still something slipped through your hands. Not dramatically. Just enough to leave a mark. There is a particular weight to loyalty when it is carried alone. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't demand recognition. It waits. And in that waiting, it begins to ask questions that are uncomfortable to answer. Was the loyalty mutual, or was it convenient? Was it seen or simply assumed? These questions don't accuse. They sit beside you, steady and calm, asking to be acknowledged. In moments like this, silence becomes revealing. Not the peaceful kind, but the honest kind. The silence that removes distraction and leaves you face to face with your own choices. Loyalty, after all, is not just about staying. It is about believing that staying matters. And sometimes only later do we realize how much we gave without ever asking. If it was truly received, this reflection is not about regret in the dramatic sense. There are no raised voices here, no shattered scenes. It is about timing. About understanding something after the window to act has quietly closed. The kind of understanding that arrives late in the evening of life, when ambition has cooled, and the noise of proving oneself has softened into a hum. There is a figure in this story. Not a man of facts or headlines, but a symbol. A man driven by vision, intensity, and relentless forward motion. Someone who believed deeply in building, in progress, in the future. Someone who thought loyalty was obvious because his focus was elsewhere. This is not biography. It is a mirror. A reflection of a pattern many recognize. When you are building something larger than yourself, loyalty can feel like a constant. You assume it is there because it has always been there. You move fast. You think later, and you don't notice the quiet erosion happening in the background. Not because you don't care, but because caring has been postponed. There is an internal conflict that grows here. The belief that purpose justifies distance, that the mission excuses emotional absence, that those who stay will always stay, simply because they understand. This belief is comforting. It allows focus. It creates efficiency. And yet, it hides a fragile assumption beneath its strength. At some point, often without warning, the assumption breaks. Not with betrayal, but with absence. A call not returned. A presence no longer present. And suddenly, loyalty is no longer theoretical. It is personal. It is felt in the chest, slow and heavy. What makes this moment difficult is not the loss itself, but the realization that loyalty is not automatic. It is cultivated. It is maintained. It requires presence, not just intention, and presence cannot be delegated to the future. There is a temptation to reframe this as a lesson learned too late, but that framing misses something important. The truth is quieter. Loyalty is not something you understand once and keep forever. It is something you must notice again and again. Especially when life accelerates. In the stillness of reflection, another question surfaces. Was loyalty expected or was it earned? There is a difference. Expectation assumes permanence. Earning requires humility. And humility often feels inefficient to those accustomed to momentum. The story does not rush toward resolution. It lingers because it needs to. Because loyalty, when examined honestly, touches self-worth. It asks whether you believed you were worth staying for, or whether you believed the work mattered. More than the people beside you, there is a subtle loneliness that accompanies this realization. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being misunderstood by your past self. You look back and see someone who meant well, who was focused, who believed sacrifice was noble, and you don't judge him. You simply see what he couldn't. Between memory and understanding, there is often a pause. A space where nothing needs to be solved yet. This pause can feel unfamiliar, especially to those who built their lives on motion. But in this pause, something essential begins to breathe again, slowly. Without pressure. Sometimes the body knows this before the mind does. a tightness during quiet moments, a hesitation when reaching out. These signals are not failures. They are invitations. They suggest that loyalty, like trust, lives not in grand gestures but in repeated, ordinary moments where attention is given freely, without the armor of urgency or distraction. They ask to be noticed now, rather than honored later with explanations that arrive gently too late. The night deepens here. The reflection slows, and in this quiet, a new awareness begins to form. Not an answer, but an openness. A sense that loyalty may not be about how long someone stays, but about how present you were while they did. This awareness does not resolve the tension. It sharpens it gently without blame. It leaves a question hanging, calm and unresolved, like a light left on in another room. If loyalty requires presence, what happens when presence arrives late, after the shape of the relationship has already changed? And what does that lateness quietly ask of you now? The next part of this reflection will stay close to that question. It will move carefully, without urgency, toward the cost of learning late and the quiet strength required to accept it without bitterness. Not to correct the past or rewrite meaning, but to understand the weight it left behind, and how that weight subtly shapes what you are capable of offering next, in work, in love, and in the way you choose to remain present when it matters most. The question stays with you longer than expected. Not loudly, not insistently, but with the patience of something that knows it will be answered eventually. What happens when presence arrives late? When awareness shows up after loyalty has already thinned, not from anger, but from neglect so subtle it once felt like progress. This is where the reflection deepens, not by looking outward, but by turning slowly inward. There is often a moment, quiet and unremarkable, when you realize you have been remembered differently than you imagined. Not as cruel, not as careless, but as distant, efficient, absorbed, the kind of distance that isn't intentional yet still felt. And that realization carries its own weight because it doesn't allow for defense. There is no villain here, only timing. For someone driven by vision, loyalty can become abstract. It feels like alignment, shared direction, mutual endurance. But loyalty, experienced from the other side, is more intimate. It listens for tone. It notices absence. It measures not how fast you move, but whether you turn your head when someone speaks. These two versions of loyalty can exist at the same time, misunderstanding each other without ever colliding. There is a cost to learning this late. It is not dramatic, but cumulative. It shows up as relationships that ended politely, without confrontation, as people who drifted rather than argued, as silence that replaced familiarity so gradually. It felt natural until it didn't, and only later do you sense that something meaningful dissolved without a single decisive moment. This is where the internal conflict sharpens. You begin to wonder whether your strength was mistaken for self-sufficiency, whether your calm focus signaled that you didn't need anyone close, and whether, in proving your resilience, you unintentionally taught others that their presence was optional. These thoughts don't accuse, they observe. And observation, when honest, can be unsettling, because it reveals how often loyalty depends on small acknowledgments rather than grand intentions. A pause, a question asked without urgency, a willingness to slow down when speed is rewarded everywhere else. There is also grief here, though it doesn't announce itself as such. It feels more like a hollow recognition, the understanding that some people would have stayed longer if they had felt seen sooner. Not convinced, not persuaded, simply noticed in the ordinary rhythm of days that felt endlessly replaceable at the time. The temptation now is to turn this into self-criticism, but that misses the point. This reflection is not about punishing the past. It is about honoring the lesson without dramatizing it. Quiet strength does not come from self-blame. It comes from clarity, and clarity often arrives after ambition has softened, after the urgency to prove fades into a desire to understand. When success no longer distracts from the subtler metrics of life, like trust, like emotional safety, like the difference between admiration and loyalty. Admiration watches from a distance. Loyalty stays close. Admiration applauds outcomes, Loyalty notices process. When you confuse the two, you may feel supported while still being emotionally alone. And only later do you realize how fragile that support was, how conditional its closeness truly felt. There is a memory that returns here, uninvited. A conversation cut short. A message answered efficiently but without warmth. A presence physically there but mentally elsewhere. At the time it felt harmless. Necessary even. Now it carries a different texture. Not guilt exactly. More like awareness catching up. This is where patience becomes essential. Not patience with others, but with yourself. Because understanding late does not mean understanding uselessly. It means you are finally ready to hold it without distortion. Earlier, it might have felt like an obstacle. Now it feels like context. There is an unspoken question beneath all of this. Can loyalty survive brilliance without presence? Can people stay connected to someone who is always leaning forward, always elsewhere, even when physically near? The answer is not absolute. But it is instructive. Loyalty, when starved of presence, becomes loyalty to an idea rather than a person. And ideas evolve. People need to feel chosen again and again, not assumed. This realization does not weaken ambition. It refines it. It asks ambition to include attention. There is a quiet humility in admitting this. A humility that doesn't announce itself or seek redemption. It simply adjusts. It recognizes that being impressive is not the same as being available. That reliability is not the same as emotional consistency. And that silence, when unexamined, can communicate indifference even when none is intended. The night feels deeper here. More settled. The reflection slows, as if giving space for something heavier to land gently. You might notice a softening in the chest, a release of defensiveness you didn't know you were holding. This is not surrender. It is recalibration. What emerges is not a promise to do better in a performative sense. It is a quieter resolve. To notice sooner, to listen longer, to treat loyalty not as a given, but as something living, responsive, and deserving of care. Still, the question remains unresolved. What do you do with the relationships that ended before this understanding arrived? There is no repairing what has already taken its final shape. There is only integration, allowing the lesson to become part of you without demanding that it fix what it cannot. This is where quiet strength is tested, in accepting that some realizations arrive after the moment they could have changed outcomes, and in choosing not to harden because of that fact, not to retreat into self-sufficiency as armor, but to stay open even when openness once felt inefficient. As this section draws to a close, the reflection does not offer comfort and resolution. It offers something subtler. A sense that loyalty, once understood, changes how you move forward. It shifts what you prioritize. It slows you just enough to notice who is beside you now, before time decides for you. In the next part of this reflection, the focus will turn gently toward love. Not romanticized love, but mature love. The kind shaped by patience, restraint, and presence. And how loyalty, when finally understood, transforms not just how you work, but how you choose to remain emotionally available when it matters most. By the time this understanding reaches love, it has already shed its urgency. It doesn't arrive as a revelation meant to impress or correct. It arrives quietly, like a truth that waited until you were calm enough to hold it without turning it into a performance. Love, in this reflection, is no longer dramatic. It is precise. It notices where loyalty once drifted and asks what presence actually looks like when ambition no longer leads the conversation. There is a different pace to mature love. It does not chase intensity. It does not demand constant reassurance. It moves slowly, almost invisibly, built on consistency rather than momentum. And this is where the earlier misunderstanding of loyalty becomes clearer. Love was never asking for grand sacrifices. It was asking for attention without distraction, for listening that didn't multitask, for moments that were not efficient but sincere. Looking back, it becomes evident how easily love can be treated like a background process, something assumed stable while focus is directed elsewhere. Not because it lacks value, but because it feels secure. and security, when unexamined, can lead to neglect that feels harmless until it accumulates. There is an internal conflict here that many never articulate. The belief that providing stability is enough, that being reliable in action compensates for being unavailable in presence, that love understands absence because love is patient. And love is patient, but patience is not infinite. It is responsive. It listens to patterns. This realization carries tenderness with it. Not sorrow exactly, but a soft ache. The ache of seeing how love might have stayed warmer if it had been met sooner with curiosity instead of certainty. How questions could have replaced assumptions. How silence could have been shared instead of filled with mental distance. There is a moment of pause here. A mental stillness where no explanation is required. Where you simply sit with the image of someone waiting, not dramatically, not angrily, but quietly adjusting to less. That image does not accuse. It teaches. Love, when examined honestly, reveals that loyalty is emotional memory. It remembers how often you were reachable, how often your eyes were present, not scanning for the next obligation, how often you allowed yourself to be interrupted without resentment. These moments, small and forgettable at the time, form the foundation of emotional safety. There is a subtle grief in realizing that safety was sometimes compromised not by betrayal, but by absence of attention. That the future was prioritized so heavily that the present was treated as a stepping stone rather than a place to stand together. This is where restraint enters the story. Not restraint as suppression, but as discipline. The discipline to slow down when speed is rewarded, to stay when leaving would feel productive, to listen fully when the mind wants to solve or move on. This restraint is quiet strength. It does not announce itself. It reshapes behavior slowly. The figure at the center of this symbolic reflection begins to change here, not by abandoning ambition, but by integrating something previously overlooked. He begins to notice that love does not need to be optimized. It needs to be inhabited. That emotional presence is not a distraction from purpose, but a grounding force that clarifies it. There is a philosophical expansion that follows naturally. If loyalty and love requires presence, then presence becomes an ethical choice. A decision to treat the moment as sufficient, even when it does not advance a goal. This challenges a mindset built on progress. It asks for a different metric of success. The mind resists this at first. It wonders whether slowing down means losing momentum, whether attention given inward will weaken outward impact. But the resistance softens as another understanding emerges. That depth creates resilience. That relationships grounded in presence require less repair. That love, when steady, becomes a place of restoration rather than obligation. There is a memory recalled here, softer than before. A shared silence that once felt uncomfortable. A pause that was filled with planning instead of connection. In hindsight, that silence was an invitation. Not to speak, but to arrive. This arrival is not dramatic. It is not marked by declarations or promises. It is felt in the body as a settling, a release of the need to be elsewhere. And with that release comes a different kind of clarity. One that sees love not as something to manage, but as something to accompany, yet the open question remains. How do you live with the knowledge that this understanding arrived after certain opportunities passed? Love, like loyalty, does not always wait for readiness. It moves on quietly when it no longer feels met. The answer does not come as consolation. It comes as responsibility. Not responsibility to fix the past, but to honor it by changing how the present is handled. By noticing earlier, by choosing presence even when it feels inefficient, by understanding that love does not need to be proven, only consistently felt. There is a calm resolve that forms here. Not an oath, not a vow, just an internal alignment. A recognition that future connections deserve a version of you that is not always leaning forward, that can stay still without anxiety, that understands loyalty as a daily practice rather than a character trait. The night feels quieter now, less analytical, more embodied. The reflection slows again, allowing space for integration rather than conclusion. You may feel a sense of warmth mixed with restraint. Not sentimental, but grounded. As this section draws toward its close, the curiosity shifts gently. If love and loyalty require presence, what does presence demand in moments of conflict, disappointment, or emotional risk? How does quiet strength show up when staying present means staying vulnerable? That question remains open, waiting patiently. In the next part of this reflection, attention will turn toward vulnerability. Not as exposure, but as steadiness, and how loyalty, once understood, reshapes the way you remain present not only in calm moments, but when emotional distance would be easier. Vulnerability enters without ceremony. It doesn't announce itself as courage, and it doesn't arrive with confidence. It appears in moments when staying present feels harder than withdrawing, when silence would be easier than honesty, when distance offers control and closeness asks for something less predictable. This is where loyalty is tested not by time, but by emotional risk. There is a common misunderstanding that vulnerability is exposure, that it means revealing everything all at once without restraint. But mature vulnerability is quieter than that. It is selective. It is intentional. It does not overshare. It stays steady. It chooses presence even when the outcome is uncertain. For someone shaped by discipline and forward motion, vulnerability can feel inefficient. It slows conversations. It complicates decisions. It introduces emotional variables that cannot be optimized or rushed. And yet, without it, loyalty becomes brittle, functional but fragile, capable of enduring stress but not intimacy. This is where the earlier lesson about presence deepens. Presence in calm moments is relatively easy. Presence in moments of discomfort is something else entirely. It asks you to stay when your instinct is to retreat into productivity, logic, or silence. It asks you to listen without preparing an exit. There is an internal tension here that often goes unnamed. The desire to remain composed versus the need to remain connected. Composure offers safety. Connection requires openness. And for a long time, composure may have been mistaken for strength. But strength, examined honestly, is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the ability to hold it without collapse, to remain grounded while allowing emotion to exist without needing to dominate or disappear. This kind of strength is quiet. It does not demand recognition. It simply stays. There is a memory that surfaces here, sharper than the others. A moment when vulnerability was offered and not fully received. Not rejected, just redirected, rationalized, postponed. At the time it seemed reasonable. Now it reveals a pattern, not of cruelty, but of avoidance. Avoidance often wears respectable disguises: responsibility, focus, self-control. These are not faults. They are virtues. But when they become shields against emotional presence, they begin to erode loyalty from within. The realization is uncomfortable because it reframes past restraint. What once felt like maturity may have been fear of disruption, fear of losing momentum, fear of entering emotional terrain without a map. And so vulnerability was postponed, waiting for a safer time that never fully arrived. This reflection does not ask for self-condemnation. It asks for honesty, the kind that looks at patterns without defense. That recognizes how emotional distance can be maintained without intention, simply by prioritizing control over connection. There is a philosophical shift that occurs here. Vulnerability is no longer seen as something that threatens loyalty. It is seen as something that sustains it. Because loyalty is not just about staying. It is about staying reachable. Reachability is subtle. It is felt in tone, not declarations. In the willingness to sit with discomfort without fixing it. In the ability to say, "I don't know yet," and remain present anyway. This is not weakness. It is emotional steadiness. The figure in this reflection begins to embody this steadiness slowly. Not by dramatic change, but by quieter choices. Pausing instead of deflecting. Listening without interrupting. Allowing moments of uncertainty to exist without rushing to resolve them. There is a noticeable shift in how conflict is approached. Less as a problem to solve, more as an experience to move through together. This does not mean tolerating harm or confusion. It means recognizing that loyalty deepens when Vulnerability is met with presence rather than distance. There is an emotional pause here. A silence that feels different from earlier silences. Not empty, not evasive, but full. A silence that allows emotion to breathe without being managed. In this pause, something settles. You begin to see that vulnerability does not require you to abandon restraint. It requires you to apply restraint differently. Not to emotion, but to the impulse to escape it. This restraint is nuanced. It is the discipline to remain when leaving would protect the ego. Another unresolved question emerges naturally. What happens when vulnerability is offered, but the other person cannot meet it? Loyalty, after all, is relational. It depends on reciprocity, not perfection. This question does not seek an immediate answer. It simply acknowledges reality. The answer, when it begins to form, is not about forcing connection. It is about clarity, about knowing when presence is shared and when it is one-sided. Loyalty does not require endurance of emotional absence. It requires mutual willingness to remain open. This understanding brings a different kind of calm. Not resignation, but discernment. The ability to stay vulnerable without losing self-respect. To remain open without dissolving boundaries. To offer presence without demanding outcomes. The night feels steadier now, less introspective, more grounded. The reflection is no longer circling the past. It is orienting toward the present, toward how loyalty, presence, and vulnerability can coexist without conflict. As this section draws toward its close, the curiosity shifts again, gently. If loyalty is sustained by presence and presence by vulnerability, what anchors vulnerability itself? What allows someone to remain open without becoming unguarded or depleted? That question remains unresolved, resting quietly at the edge of awareness. In the final part of this reflection, attention will turn toward self-worth. Not as confidence, but as grounding. And how understanding loyalty too late reshapes the way you stand with yourself. Even when no one else is watching, self-worth is rarely loud. It doesn't introduce itself with confidence or certainty. It settles in slowly, almost unnoticed, shaped by how you treat yourself when no one is asking anything of you. By the time this reflection reaches self-worth, the urgency is gone. What remains is steadiness. A quiet understanding that loyalty, presence, and vulnerability all rest on something deeper than intention. They rest on how firmly you stand with yourself. There is a subtle shift that happens when loyalty is understood too late. At first it feels like loss, then like regret. But eventually, if allowed, it becomes alignment. You stop measuring yourself by outcomes you can no longer change and start measuring yourself by how honestly you inhabit the present. This is where self-worth becomes grounding rather than performative. For a long time, self-worth may have been tied to usefulness, to output, to reliability, to being the one who carries weight without complaint. That kind of worth is efficient but fragile. It depends on motion. And when motion slows, it leaves a quiet question behind. Who are you when you are not producing, solving, or moving forward? This question does not demand an answer. It invites presence. Because self-worth in its mature form is not something you prove. It is something you allow. It exists in the moments you choose not to abandon yourself for approval, productivity, or control. There's an internal reconciliation that happens here. You see that loyalty to others was sometimes easier than loyalty to yourself. That staying committed outwardly felt safer than staying emotionally honest inwardly. And yet, without self-loyalty, outward loyalty eventually thins. It becomes obligation rather than choice. This realization is not harsh. It is clarifying. It explains why presence was difficult before, why vulnerability felt risky, why silence was easier than emotional engagement. Not because you lacked care, but because your inner ground was always leaning forward. Never fully settled, self-worth settles that ground. Not by inflating the self, but by stabilizing it. It allows you to remain present without fear of losing momentum. To listen without feeling diminished. To be vulnerable without feeling exposed. Because you are no longer negotiating your value in the interaction, there is a memory that returns one last time, softer than all the others. A moment alone, Late evening. No audience. No pressure. Just the awareness of having done your best with what you knew at the time. This awareness does not excuse mistakes. It contextualizes them. And context brings peace. Peace in this sense is not comfort. It is coherence. The feeling that your inner values and outward behavior are no longer in quiet conflict. That loyalty is no longer assumed, but chosen. That presence is no longer delayed, but practiced. That vulnerability is no longer avoided, but anchored. This anchoring changes how you relate to others. You no longer stay out of fear of being misunderstood. You stay because you want to. And when you leave, you do so without bitterness. Because loyalty, when rooted in self-worth, does not require self-abandonment. There is a philosophical expansion here, gentle and unforced. If loyalty is a choice, then it must be renewed, not promised indefinitely. Renewed through attention, honesty, and restraint. And self-worth allows you to renew it without resentment. Because you are not overextending to secure belonging, you begin to notice how this changes love. Love becomes calmer, less urgent, less anxious. You are no longer proving devotion through endurance. You are expressing it through presence. And when presence is shared, loyalty deepens naturally. When it is not, you no longer question your value. This is where the story comes full circle. The understanding that arrived late is no longer heavy. It has been integrated. It informs but does not dominate. It guides without condemning. And in that integration, something quiet but strong takes root. Quiet strength is not intensity. It is reliability of self. The ability to stay grounded regardless of outcome. To offer presence without guarantee. To be loyal without losing clarity. To be vulnerable without dissolving boundaries. The figure in this reflection is no longer defined by what was missed. He is defined by how he stands now, slower, more attentive, less distracted by proving, more willing to inhabit moments fully. Even when they do not advance anything measurable, there is an emotional pause here, longer than the others. A stillness that feels complete, not resolved, but settled, as if the reflection no longer needs to search. It knows what it was looking for. The final understanding is simple, but not easy. Loyalty is not learned once. It is relearned at every stage of life. And learning it late does not disqualify you. It prepares you. It strips away illusions and leaves something more durable behind. Self-worth holds all of this together. It allows you to look back without resentment, to look forward without urgency, and to remain present without fear that stillness will erase you. As the night draws to a close, there is no call to action, no lesson to apply, just an invitation to sit with what has surfaced, to notice who is beside you now, to notice yourself, and to remember that loyalty, when rooted in presence and self-worth, is not something you owe. It is something you choose quietly again and again. In moments that rarely announce their importance, but shape everything that follows.